on building a decentralized application. Just quickly, if you can confirm if my voice is audible, if you can see my video quickly in the chat, and also if you're all excited for today's session. Thank you so much all for joining in on a Sunday evening. We have a wonderful speaker, Anshu Jalan, with us, already waiting to kickstart the session. He's a smart contract and backend engineer. He's researching and developing a lot of things on Tezos and a lot of insights that he's going to share with us today. I'll just take a moment and share what we're going to talk about. So today, the idea of the session is, just one second. Let me just stop my screen share. Yeah, perfect. So today, there are a few things that we are going to talk about, starting from what is a DM, how to build one, and what are the things that you can do with that. What is a tech stack that you can use, and how does stack interact with front end and back end? A lot of questions that are going on, in a lot of our discussions in community. So that's why we thought, why not person who's actually building on blockchain, get him up and share what he's doing, how exactly this happens, so we have a quick understanding. Anshu, are we good to go?
Yeah, all good.
Perfect. Over to you.
Well, I'll share my screen.
Yeah.
Is it visible?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Awesome. Just give me a moment. Any idea how do I hide the the pop-out thing of Zoom? It's covering half my screen.
So what you can do is when you click on the screen share button, you
okay, got it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So a very good evening to everyone present here. So today's session will be all about answering some of the most integral yet unanswered questions when it comes to building a decentralized application. And talking about questions, the first question you would have in your mind right now is, who exactly am I and what's my background? So by profession, I am a smart contract and backend engineer, and I've been exploring and building in the Web3 space since the time it was and wasn't even called Web3. So it's been quite long. I originally started building on Ethereum, and I then moved on to Tezos blockchain, where I'm currently building DeFi protocols. I am also a part-time workshop instructor, which is just my way of saying that when the market is down, I'm out there teaching people how to build dApps. So yeah, that's about who I am. So one thing, usually when I teach people, I'm all about the hows. I teach how to code, I teach how to design, I teach how to optimize the dApps. Every time it's about the how, but today I'll take a step back because this is a Kickstarter session. And instead of teaching you the hows, I'll focus on the what's and the whys. Why should you build something and what should you build? That is what I'll be focusing upon. Because as it sits, going from 1 to 100 is really difficult on something. 1 to 100, it's all about the hows, like how do you build it? How do you optimize it? The real difficulty is in going from 0 to 1. 0 to 1 is all about generating ideas, generating a novel idea, knowing what to build. It can even be something like improvement of something that is already there. And that is really difficult. So most of our discussion today will be focused on the 0 to 1 transition. And as for the flow of this presentation, we will start with talking about how can you generate ideas for a dApp. Now, I assume you guys already have some basic understanding of what a dApp is, but just to give an example, so let's say if you see something like on Instagram or Twitter that some Bored Ape NFT is being sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars, then this selling is actually taking place on a digital marketplace. And this digital marketplace is actually a dApp. It's decentralized. The D is decentralized because it's made using smart contracts that's on a decentralized network. That's the blockchain. An app, well, because it's a web app that is being served to you guys. That is what you interact with the blockchain using. So yeah, that's why it's a dApp. So first we'll discuss how to generate ideas for a dApp, and then I'll solve your dilemma that which blockchain should you build on, considering there are tons of blockchains around right now. Then we'll get to the tech side of it all, and that's where we discuss the components of a decentralized application. And then I'll give a peek into how we develop dApps in the professional setting. And finally, I'll leave you guys with some advice and some next steps that you can implement right after this session. So that's with the flow. Now, before we get started, just a quick heads up for the non-tech folks here, because I've been made aware that a lot of you are not from a tech background. So for you, well, I have a good news and a not so good news. The good news is that in the Web3 space, we have a huge demand for non-tech people. We have things like product design, marketing, content writing. There's a huge demand for you guys. But the not so good news is that you can't shy away from the tech, because Web3 is so new, and you really need to get yourself involved with the tech. And by this, I don't mean that you have to go ahead and start learning how to code, but ideally what you should do is try to understand how the tech works, understand the architecture of the tech. That is what you should know, because otherwise there's this rift that's going to develop between you and the tech. And then eventually, those of you who have seen Silicon Valley TV series, you would know, you would turn up like Russ Hanneman, who was trying to put the radio on the internet. It's not possible. Just in this case, instead of putting the radio on the internet, you would try something like putting the social media on the blockchain. Well, it's not possible. Not possible, at least without giving up on decentralization. So don't let this rift occur between you and the tech. Don't shy away from the tech. So we have our non-techies, we have our techies, and it doesn't matter who is creating a project. The one thing that you might have been stuck with while creating a project is the ideation phase. The ideation phase is the 0 to 1 phase, where you are conceptualizing an idea. Now, if you have ever been stuck in the ideation phase, one thing that you might have done in your past is Google it. Like Google the next idea, the next top 10 dApp ideas that you could build upon. But you should really not do that. At least in the Web3 space, you just shouldn't. Because the problem is, since Web3 is so new, Google is all about the 1 to hundreds. So it will teach you how to build stuff and how to optimize and everything, but it will leave out on the what's and the hows. And whatever content there is concerning the what's and the hows, the way you will be bombarded with jargonish words like private money, private identity. Like, I get it. All of these are concepts that Web3 provides by default. You can't make these concepts. You use these concepts to make something, right? So this is one thing that Google is not getting yet because of how new Web3 is. So now you might ask, okay, well, Google is out of the equation. What should I do to generate an idea? Well, to go from 0 to 1, you must first start at 0. And starting at 0 means you need to get your foundation right. Go ahead, get a basic understanding of economics, finance, and finally decentralized finance. That's finance on the blockchain. Now, right now, tech folks would be like, come on, we are coders, we write code. Why would we even get into economics and finance? But let me be honest with you. When Web3 was designed, it was designed to give us a better system of money, sound money, or also in general, a better system of assets. Because let's say if we have some art in the form of an NFT, then that's a really good form of an asset because you can easily transfer it, you can buy and sell it. So that is what Web3 was all about. Later on, when things like metaverse and better version of the internet got in, this is all ambient noise. 99% of the value is still in the sound money system that Web3 is providing. And when money is involved, you need to have some finance game in you. So for the tech folks, don't shy away from getting a basic understanding of economics and finance. It's really, really important for you. Now, you might ask, well, like these are such broad fields. Where should I actually start, even if I want to get a basic knowledge of it? Well, for that, I have boiled it down to 4 really important topics, which personally helped me when I was starting my journey. Like until I actually got a basic understanding of these 4 concepts, it was really difficult to understand what's going on with all these dApps out there. So the first 2, it's really elementary economics. You need to have a basic idea of supply, demand, and inflation. As you might know that most of the dApps actually have tokenomics involved with it. There is some kind of a token in play. And to understand tokenomics, you must have a basic understanding of supply, demand, and inflation. That's basic economics. And then we have the order book system. Now, order book system is usually how buying and selling works on exchanges. So if you're like have a stock exchange, then stock exchanges have an order book on their platform. Now it's a bit abstract, like if you know about order books, it can help you understand several other topics in your Dapp development journey. For instance, we have something called automated market makers on the blockchain. I'll get to automated market makers in depth later on. But if you understand order book systems, you can understand how AMMs are a better version of this system. And finally, we have derivatives. So things like futures, options, these words will keep being thrown around if you already work in a finance field or you're maybe from a commerce background. But once again, if you have a general understanding of derivatives, it will really propel you forward if someone is talking about some Dapp that has on-chain derivatives. So these 4 topics, you really don't have to read a book or something. Just go on Google, type the topic out, read a few articles. And really in 1.5 day, you will have a good understanding of what all of these are. It's really so easy. So now you have an understanding of the basic concepts. What should you do now? Well, go get your hands dirty, explore what's already out there. So let's say if you are in the general fintech space and you're trying to build like a stock trading platform, then obviously you can't build a stock trading platform if you haven't used one already, right? So you first need to go out there and explore the dApps that are already there. Watch the YouTube tutorials and then experiment with the testnet versions of the Dapp. So the best thing about blockchains is that there's a testnet version on every blockchain, and most of the dApps are deployed on the testnet version. So you can explore with basically, I shouldn't say fake, but it's like fake money. It doesn't have really value, but you can experiment and understand how the Dapp works. So that's a very beautiful thing about blockchains. It's very difficult to find that in Web2 space. So now your question would be, well, okay, I want to explore dApps, but there's so much out there. Like even if you write something like top 10 dApps in Google, you will have like more than 10 definitely showing up. So where should you actually start in this whole plethora of dApps that's actually there on the internet? Well, for that, I have actually, again, boiled it down to some really important resources and dApps that you should refer to. And I'm not sure whether these slides will be shared with you guys because these images are links. So I request GrowthSchool to maybe share the link of the slides with the students here. So the first is the YouTube channels. The YouTube channels I have boiled down here. These are some of the best out there. They completely dissect the things that's there on the blockchains, and they also give you proper tutorials of how to interact with these dApps. So ideally, you should watch these YouTube channels and go ahead. And if you want to explore on Ethereum, then you can go ahead, and first thing you should do is explore Uniswap. Now, Uniswap is a dApp which is very simple. On blockchains, we have tokens, right? So let's say you have 2 tokens, or you have 1 token and you want to get another token. So basically you want to swap 1 token for another for some price, right? Think of this like you have stock of 1 company and you want the stock of another company and you just want to, conduct a swap between them. Then something like that can happen with tokens on Uniswap. You insert 1 token and you will swap and get another token. So very simple to understand. And this is really the first application that you should interact with on the blockchain if you're just starting out. Next, we have Maker. Maker is also called MakerDAO. It's a really popular name. And what Maker does is it's a stable coin system. Now, you might have heard of stable coins because in the blockchain space, usually the coins we deal with, they are really volatile. Like today, the value is $200, tomorrow it's $300. And that's not very ideal if we are trying to make a hard financial use case. So stable coins hold their value to some external peg, usually $1. So 1 stable coin equals $1. And Maker is a system using which you can create stable coins. So learning about stable coins is really essential when you are just starting out your journey. And also this will teach you a very basic form of collateralized borrowing. This is another thing that you will keep hearing in the blockchain space, collateralized and borrowing. So Maker is the most basic form of that in the Dapp space. So you should definitely check out Uniswap and Maker if you want to get better understanding. Finally, if you want to explore Tezos, that's another blockchain. That's where I work. You can, on Tezos, we have equivalent. applications. For Uniswap, we have KipuSwap, and for Maker, we have Colibri. Both work in a completely same way, same mathematics, same design, just the tech stack is different because the blockchain is different. Now, I have just given the example of Ethereum and Tezos because that's what I have experience with, but you can definitely explore similar dApps on other chains. Most of the blockchains have equivalent dApps. So yeah, these two are not, the discussion is definitely not limited to these two. So now, once you explore all these dApps, you'll be like, wow, they are so cool. Like once you go ahead and you explore Uniswap, you'll be thrilled. Like it's so flawless and so seamless. And you'd really want to make one because, well, that's why you are here. You want to make a decentralized application. So how do you make these? Well, the first thing into making something is to understand how existing dApps are designed, right? You see a building and you just can't make a building, right? You need to understand how small buildings are made, and then you can make a very large building, right? So reverse engineer some of the existing ideas. And if you want to ask like which ideas, for that, I have once again boiled it down to 4 ideas. 3 I've already discussed: Uniswap, MakerDAO, Colibri. And another one is Compound Protocol. I will be discussing that later on. So the thing here is these are code repositories. So the ones who are from the tech background, you can definitely go and check out the code. But obviously, you first need to watch some YouTube tutorials to understand the language in which these contracts are written. But for the non-tech folks, well, you don't have to shy away with this or get scared because this is code. What you can do is you can go ahead and understand the architecture and the math, like how exactly it is working, what's happening behind the scenes. You don't really need the code to understand what's happening behind the scenes, because most of these protocols, they have a white paper and a technical paper. The white paper is really easy to understand, and you can give it a quick read and just understand the math and how things are working under the hood. So go ahead. This is something which both the techies and the non-techies can explore. These 4 are basically entry points for your dApp journey. Now, once you have an idea of existing dApps or how existing dApps are designed, one thing that you can do is, like, this is really ideal time to do this. And that is you pick a blockchain. There are like so many blockchains out there. I'll discuss like how to pick a blockchain, but just pick one and then choose an existing dApp and build that on that blockchain, considering that that dApp is not already there. And I have given an example on the screen, which is a personal example. So there's this thing called Keeper Network on Ethereum. It's really popular. And what Keeper Network does is that, let's say you are a developer and you are trying to develop something, and that needs some kind of automation. So your dApp needs some kind of automation. And this automation, you really don't want to do it yourself because it might be time consuming, or you don't really have a team or the expertise to do the automation. Then you can delegate this task to Keeper Network, and Keeper Network will automate it for you. It's a really beautiful concept. And Tezos, where I'm currently building protocols, I realized there wasn't an equivalent network and we really needed it. So I took the Keeper Network design and I had to restructure it to fit Tezos because Tezos has a different architecture. So the usual Keeper Network won't fit on Tezos. So I had to restructure it, redesign it. And I finally made something called Sizzler Network on Tezos, which basically does the same thing as Keeper Network, but the design is different, and it was really a great learning journey. So after learning about existing dApps, the next thing which I recommend you should do is build something that already exists, or just build it for some other blockchain where it's not present, because the code is all open source. So basically the only thing you have to do is minor restructuring and, well, you're good to go. And also one other thing that you can do is, if you have an existing dApp, you can make a better version of it. This is always a great thing. So one great example of this is that we have Uniswap, which I just discussed. You put one token, you get another token at some price. Curve, this is written Curve contract, but this is actually Curve Finance. Curve Finance is actually a better version of Uniswap. So the thing is, on Uniswap, if you are doing very high value trades, like if you have a lot of tokens to swap, then the thing is there will be something called slippage. Those of you who have some knowledge of finance, you might understand what slippage is. But basically, if the price of an asset is, let's say, $5. But if you are trading a huge amount of that asset, then instead of getting $5, you will get a little bit less, like maybe 4.5 or 4. So this is called slippage, this difference. And this is not very ideal because, well, you ideally don't, you want the price that is being shown to you, right? So what Curve did was they changed all the equations that's in the backend, and they made this new system where you don't have that kind of a slippage. You have, but it's really, really less. So instead of getting 4.5 from 5, you will get maybe 4.99, that low slippage. So this is like the best example of how you can improve existing models. And once ahead, these are links to repositories, so you can go ahead and see the math. It's like very easy to understand, just basic equations, but beautifully designed. So, well, now let's say if you want to make something completely new, you don't really want to improve something that's already existing or deploy an existing system onto some other blockchain, but you really want to build something completely new. Then what you can do is study existing financial systems and then disrupt it on the blockchain. This might sound a bit difficult when you are just a beginner, but down the lane, when you already have some experience, you will really find this somewhat intuitive. So let's say, just like I discussed, we have order book based exchanges in the Web2 space, and Uniswap is a better version of it. And the way it's better is that on a traditional stock exchange, you might have heard of these entities called market makers. They basically put buy and sell orders. So let's say if you're going ahead and buying crypto, chances are some market maker has set some orders and you are taking basically the orders from the market makers. Now, market making in the traditional financial world, it's really difficult because they have to keep maintaining something called bid-ask spread. So basically they have to provide liquidity and maintain it on the exchange. But in this case, in the case of Uniswap, it's automated market making. So basically they just put assets into the system and you just forget it. People can come swap one asset for another and everything is good to go. This is also called lazy market making. These terms are a bit difficult to understand if you're not completely from a finance background. But once again, like I said, the moment you get some of your foundation right, all of this, which I spoke about today, you're going to understand it in like one go. It's so fundamental. And in a similar way, there are these traditional money markets that are present in the Web2 space, which were converted to on-chain money markets by Compound protocol. Now, money market is basically lending and borrowing of money at a very small interest rate. Most of it is controlled by governments and large banks. And it's a space which is really difficult for normal individuals to get into. Like, I really can't think of getting into traditional money markets. There's so many barriers of entry. But the moment Compound protocol made a money market on the blockchain, it's so open. Anyone can be a part of it. Anyone can lend their assets at a very small interest rate, and and also borrow assets if that is your thing. So Compound protocol, this is a beautiful thing. And if you remember, I've also linked the repository of Compound protocol in a previous slide. So if you just want to understand how it is actually working under the hood, you can go through the repository. It's very easy to understand. And this is one of the things that you should explore besides Uniswap and MakerDAO when you're just starting your journey. And finally, let's say if you just want completely fresh ideas, I would really recommend go ahead, follow the experts. This is a non-exhaustive list of some of the experts that I found in my Twitter followings. So you can go ahead, follow one of them, and you would see that if you read their blogs or their tweets, they often explain completely new concepts. Like recently, Vitalik Buterin came up with the concept of something called soul-bound tokens. And literally every other day, I'm getting like texts from someone who is trying to build on soul-bound tokens. So that's like a really great thing if you follow these experts and try to build on the ideas they are projecting onto the world. Now, finally, well, you have a complete understanding of dApps. You know how to build a dApp. Now the question is, which blockchain should you choose? If you go to something like CoinMarketCap, you will see like there are at least 50 blockchains with over $1 billion market cap. And all of these blockchains have active community. And it's really difficult to distinguish like which one should you actually build on, which one can you actually build a career on? And honestly, the only answer for that I have is find your fit. I was personally building on Ethereum back in 2018, 19, and then I shifted to Tezos and I really found my fit there. And you can do something similar. You can build on Solana and see if that works for you. But one thing that I recommend is that don't keep switching blockchains. Switch maybe once if you're not finding your fit, but pick one and stay there. Because the thing with blockchains is that, and the entire Web3 space, is every other chain is progressing so fast that if you keep jumping from one chain to another, you will lose track of where one chain is and what's being developed. And you would essentially be a master of none, and that's really not ideal. So pick one blockchain, explore it, see if it fits you, and stay on it. This is really the best thing you could do to make a proper Web3 career. And once again, this is not an exhaustive list of blockchains on the screen. It's just some of the top ones that came into my mind when I was making the slides. Another thing that you can do right now is you can build on rollups. So these are actually proper chains, excluding Polygon, which is like an L2 solution. But in here, these are rollups. Now, rollups were actually built as solution to scale Ethereum. So Ethereum, as you might know, it can't do more than 20 transactions per second. So these rollups were built as basically sort of tools initially to scale these transactions up. But later on, they developed into a complete ecosystem of their own, and right now they have their own community. So if you're starting out, you can just go ahead and join a community on a rollup. Right now we have Optimism, Arbitrum, and Loopring. These are the most famous ones out there. All of them have their dedicated communities. And if you're starting a journey, just go ahead, join one of them, and you will actually feel like you're on an actual blockchain and not like a rollup, which is like a side solution to scaling a blockchain. So in case you're wondering, well, will that actually work for you? Then yes, very recently, there's this project called Velodrome Finance, which is an improved version of Curve Finance. And they launched on Optimism Rollup. And in a very small amount of time, they were able to get a total value locked of $20 million. TVL is basically a very important measurements when you are studying DeFi protocols, like how much value is locked in the protocol. And they got $20 million in a very small amount of time on a rollup. So that's incredible. So you can definitely consider building on rollups too. But now, what if you really want a judging criteria? You don't really want to explore and find your fit, but rather you want some criteria using which you can pick one blockchain and then build on it. So for that, choose what matters to you. And what matters to you, that could be decentralization and fundamentals. And decentralization and fundamentals basically boils down to three important concepts. The first thing is you might choose a blockchain which has low barriers of entry for validators. I guess you would already know what validators or nodes are. Nodes are the individual servers in a decentralized blockchain network. So you might choose a blockchain where you personally can be a validator alongside being a developer, because the validator requirements are not very high. Some blockchains, they have a tremendously high validator requirements. So it's really difficult for entities to get into this space and become a validator. So this might be one criteria that you want to look into. Secondly, you might want to look into tokenomics. If the tokenomics is sound, so let's say if the blockchain has a token, all blockchains have a token. Well, so how well is the tokens distributed, whether it's a VC focused blockchain or whether it's a community focused blockchain? It all depends on what matters to you. So you can even check the tokenomics before choosing a blockchain. And finally, you can even, this is actually really important, you should also check the team of experts that's actually backing up the blockchain and the ones who are improving it. Because we all know what happened with Luna. They were a team of experts, but apparently they didn't have past credibility, and we all know what happened. So you can definitely check out if the team is credible, if they have done something of value in the past, and then based on that, you can go ahead and choose a blockchain to build on. So apart from decentralization and fundamentals, one thing that might also matter to you is EVM interoperability. Now, EVM is Ethereum virtual machine, and that's basically the code interpreter of Ethereum. This is mostly focused for the for the techies, because the thing with EVM interoperability is that if you write a code on Ethereum, then you can basically run the same code without making any changes on all the EVM compatible chains. So here we have like Avalanche C chain and all the rollups and also Polygon. So these can run EVM code without any changes. So if you want to build on EVM chains, you can go ahead and do that if that matters to you. And finally, if you want something, or if you want a chain that constantly upgrades, then you can choose Tezos. It's the only chain out there that constantly upgrades, because upgrading a chain is really difficult. Like Ethereum, you know, like the whole ETH merge drama that's happening, converting Ethereum from Ethereum 1 to Ethereum 2. So upgrading a chain is really difficult, but on Tezos, just by design, it's a bit easy. And recently we have had a few upgrades like gas optimizations. Gas optimizations basically means that the computations on the chain are becoming easier day by day. And fast finality means that if you're sending a transaction to the blockchain, it's getting confirmed faster than before. And then finally, we have enshrined roll-ups. These are like an incredible concept. So let's say if you are building on Ethereum, if you want to build a roll-up, basically we have different companies trying to build a roll-up system like Optimism and Arbitrum, which we just spoke about. But on Tezos, rollups are built into the protocol. That's why it's called Enshrined Roll-Ups. So if these are things that matter to you, then you can choose Tezos. So that's about all the blockchains that you can choose from. But now let's say you have selected a blockchain. Now you might be wondering what tech stack could be used to build all these dApps. Now this is slightly, once again, focused on the tech guys, but once again, it's having an idea of the tech stacks is really good for the non-techies too, because if you're working in a larger team and interacting with the tech folks there, then if some words are being thrown around, you can also tell, well, I know all that. So yeah, this is something that you should focus upon too. So to understand what tech stack is used to build dApps, let's explore what are the components of the dApps first. So some of these components you would already know about. First is the smart contracts, and this is the decentralized component of a dApp. So this is the D in the dApp. And smart contracts are basically pieces of code that run on the blockchain. And when Ethereum was launched, so Ethereum was the first chain to have smart contracts. That time, you can only code using Solidity. Solidity was a native language that was written specifically to write smart contracts. But later on, right now, we see that there are so many chains and all of them have some kind of a language using some kind of a default language like Python, TypeScript, and on Solana, we have Rust and C++. These are languages you already know, and you can use these languages to write smart contracts. So this space has really come very far. And if you already know like a very basic programming language like Python, you can go ahead, use Python to write smart contracts on some chain that supports Python. And then apart from the smart contracts, we have the front end. So the front end is actually used to interact with these smart contracts that's deployed on the blockchain. And just like a standard front end for a Web2 app, you can use like a React, Vue, or some other libraries like Angular. And these libraries are basically JS libraries that you use to make the front end. And what you get from the blockchain is some other libraries, like on Tezos, we have Taquito and Conceal. On Ethereum, we have Web3 and Ether.js. These libraries allow you to connect your front end with the smart contracts. So let's say if we have an NFT marketplace where the Bored Apes are being sold. So when you are selling an ape, you are actually sending a transaction to the NFT smart contract. And to send these transactions, you can use one of these tools. So this is where these tools come into play. And finally, indexing solutions. Now, this is really important. One thing to understand, and this even the non-tech folks should really focus upon, and that is smart contracts are inherently slow. Web3 is like really, really new, and we are yet to make Web3 really fast. So since smart contracts are slow, if you want to speed up the process of fetching data from smart contracts. So let's say if you have an NFT marketplace where you are selling NFTs and someone has put an NFT up for sale, then because the smart contracts are so slow, actually pulling out these NFTs that are put for sale from the contract and showing it on your app, that might take some time. At times, it might take even a few seconds, like 10, 12 seconds. And that's not very ideal, because we all know, even if at times our internet is like 5 seconds slow, we just lose our minds, and 10, 12 seconds, it's like too much. So for this, we have indexing solutions. What an indexer does is that it, as and when operations are happening on the smart contract, the indexer pulls the operations and it stores the operations or the data from the operations in a normal server, a normal database server like Postgres or MongoDB, depending upon whichever you want to use. And then instead of pulling data from the smart contract, you pull data from these servers. So it gets really, really fast. So on Tezos, we have this tool called DipDup, which is an indexing solution. And on Ethereum and several other chains, we have the Graph protocol, which is like an incredible thing if you want an indexing solution. Recently, I think they sent a notification that they will be launching on Solana too. So the Graph protocol is on several chains. So now you might wonder, we have three components. We have the smart contracts, we have the front end, and we have the indexing solution. And the indexing solution, basically, they are called indexers. So how does it all fit together? So firstly, on the blockchain, we have the smart contracts. The smart contracts is where every decentralized aspect of the application lies. And let's say if in this case, we have a React front end, and we use the Taquito library to send transactions to the smart contract. So let's say if this is an NFT smart contract, the transaction would be, maybe you are selling an NFT. So that's a transaction. Now, whenever a transaction is happening, the indexer is taking the transaction from the smart contract and it is putting the data in some normal Web 2 database like Postgres, like in here I have Postgres, but you can use any that you want. And finally, that data is being fetched by the front end using any API. You can use GraphQL or maybe your standard REST API. So yeah, it's actually very, very simple. In Web 2, you just had the front end and the back end, but in here you have the front end, the indexing back end, as well as the smart contract. So just one extra component. And if you already have a basic understanding of programming, this would be like a piece of cake for you. We already understand what's going on in here. So now, well, we learned quite a lot of things till now. And you might be wondering, how does it all look in a professional setting? Sorry. How does it all look in a professional setting? Like, how do we develop dApps in a proper production level environment? Well, for that, the first thing that we do, and one thing before I start, so obviously you can take inspiration from professional development in your personal dApp development journey, because most of these that we do in a professional development, you can also just mimic it in your personal development, because there's not much of a difference apart from a few things that I will be telling later on. So the first thing that we do is we just don't open a code editor and start writing smart contracts. Rather, we use a framework that makes it really seamless to write and test smart contracts. So on Tezos, we have this thing called Chinstrap and Taqueria. And on Ethereum, there are two really popular tools, Hardhat and Foundry. So whenever you are writing smart contracts, you actually use these tools to streamline your process of going from 0 to 1 on the smart contracts. And they really help you with testing the contract, because when you're writing code, you must test it for vulnerabilities and bugs, right? So long story short, it all starts with smart contracts being written using some framework. Now, finally, when the smart contracts are written, the next thing that we do in a professional setting is we go ahead and give the smart contract to professional auditors. Now, these auditors basically check contracts for vulnerabilities and bugs. Now, this won't be very useful to you in your personal development, obviously, because like, how will you use auditors in a simple personal dApp? But knowing this is helpful, because you should always know that you can never be too confident about the code that you write. because these smart contracts are immutable. Once you deploy it on the blockchain, the smart contracts can't be changed. So you should be really, really careful when you're writing your contracts. And these auditors are basically a second level of defense. So after you are really careful, you give these auditors to try and break your contracts. And if they are able to break it, well, they return it to you. You have to fix it and give them again. And you keep doing it until we reach a point where the contracts are completely safe from any security vulnerability. And the funny part is, so these security techniques of actually checking for vulnerabilities keep evolving. And recently, just 3 days ago, a small bug was found in MakerDAO's code. So MakerDAO has been around since 2018, and for 4 years, no one figured out that bug in the code. But because of improvements in security check techniques, someone was able to figure out that, yes, there is a minor bug, but it's not something that is making the entire system vulnerable. But yeah, there is a bug. So after we have written the smart contracts, we got audited contracts, we start setting up the front end. Now, these on the screen, you can see front ends for Uniswap and Plenty DeFi. Plenty DeFi is what we are making on Tezos. And both of these are the swapping systems which I spoke about. So you can insert one token, as you can see on top, one token is being inserted, and you get a certain value of another token. So it's really simple to understand. And this is the front-end UI using which you interact with the contract. So the contract has all the mathematical logic, and the front end is just a portal to interact with the contracts. And when we are developing, we usually don't deploy the contracts on the mainnet. Like I said, all blockchains have a mainnet and a testnet. Testnet has fake money, so you're not losing any money if you are testing on the testnet. So we deploy the contracts on a testnet and connect the UI to those contracts and test them out. So after the contracts are ready, after the UI is ready, we go up and start setting up the indexers. Now, usually this is a classic pain point. Setting up indexers is a really complicated task on most blockchains, because we have to be really careful, because if we make some mistake in the indexer, then it's going to pull wrong data from the blockchain, and you'll be showing wrong data on the front end. So setting up the indexers is something where we have to be really, really careful. And after the indexers are set up, the last thing is to connect the indexing backend with the front end. Because like I said, we are not pulling the data from the contracts. We are always pulling it from the indexers directly, because pulling data from the contract is really, really slow. So just in these 5 steps, we are actually developing a complete application. And this might look like just 5 steps, but it sometimes takes like 7-8 months. So we start with the contracts, then we send the contracts for auditing, and then we make the front end, and we connect it with contracts on the testnet. Then we set up the indexers, and then we go ahead and connect the front end with the indexers. So if you are wanting to use this kind of a flow in your development, well, sure, go ahead, use it. You will follow through every step except the second step, because obviously you're not sending your contracts for audit. So yeah, this is something you can definitely take inspiration from. So finally, you all have learned a lot of things today. Now, what's the best advice that I have for all the Dapp developers who are just starting off on this journey? Well, I'll reiterate on something that I already said before, and that is, go ahead, read the code of existing dApps. And if you just want to start with some dApps, like today after this session, for those who want to explore Ethereum, go ahead, read the code of Uniswap v2. And those who want to explore Tezos, go ahead, read the code of Colibri. These two are the perfect entry points for you guys to build dApps, or at least dApps that really matter. You can go ahead and make voting dApps in NFT marketplaces, but most of them already exist and they are really simple to understand. But these dApps, they have some real material in them. And as for the code is concerned, so once again, the techies, you can definitely go ahead, check the code out. For the non-techies, don't have to understand the code. Just try to understand the math, the architecture, and read the white paper. These 3 things, if you do, you will already have a complete understanding of how all these applications work. And one motivation for you guys. So this is units of V2, but right now we also have V3, which is a bit more advanced. That's why I haven't recommended to you guys. So units of V3 was actually conceptualized by a team where none of them knew coding, and they were the main ideators of units of V3. And later on, the engineers came in and they actually built out the system. But actual units of V3, most of it was developed by people who didn't even know how to code. They were just ideators who understood all these systems really well. So yeah, that's how you can get along on your Dapp development journey. Any questions from you guys?
Interesting, a very fun session with a tech-heavy slang, because applications are all about that.
Yeah.
But yes, I think a lot of questions in the chat. Was observing. Let's take some. Okay, guys, time for questions. Put it all you have. We have good enough time for taking the questions. Can you talk a little bit about roll-ups? I guess that's where people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, roll-ups, it's really the buzzword on crypto Twitter right now. So I'll explain why we need roll-ups. So on Ethereum, the thing is, on blockchains, we have blocks, right? And these blocks have limited capacities. But because so many people are using blockchains, these blocks are getting filled up really fast. And because of this block fill up, people are basically having to pay more and more fees on blockchain. When you're interacting, you have to pay a small fees. So this fees is really increasing because of the blocks being filled up. So the people who pay more fees, their transaction is being inserted before the people who pay less fees, right? So because of this building up of fees, Ethereum has a huge scalability problem. And for this, rollups came in. So what rollups do is that instead of doing all these computations, so every transaction basically involves computations, right? You're basically checking who is sending how much Ethereum to which other account, right? So these are basically computations, and instead of doing these computations on the Ethereum main chain, you offload these computations onto external servers. And these servers are, that's why called L2 solutions, because Ethereum is L1, and these servers to which you're offloading these tasks to, they are called L2 servers. And these L2 servers don't have such stringent block limits or security of Ethereum. Instead, what these L2 servers do is that they just process all the transactions and they batch several transactions into one transaction. So let's say you can do 500 transactions on rollups really fast, and all of that will be squeezed to one transaction. That's why it's called rollup. You're rolling up several transactions into one, and this transaction is then put onto Ethereum L1. So you can see several transactions to one transaction, and this is where you are getting the scaling up effect. So instead of just doing that one, we can do 500 on rollup. Now, this is just a random number that I'm giving. It really depends on the rollup design, how much you can do, whether it's 500 or 2000. So that's the basic concept.
Got it. And we spoke a lot about choosing the blockchain.
Yep.
So in your experience, when looking for a blockchain for a DApp, what are the parameters to consider while evaluating?
Well, for me personally, the biggest thing that I look are the two things. Firstly, it's the validator requirement, which I spoke about, how easy it is to actually join the blockchain as a validator, because this is a parameter for decentralization. Let's say if you require something like a huge machine to join the blockchain, then obviously very few people will be joining the blockchain, right, as validators, and it won't be very decentralized. Like, I don't want to take names here, obviously, but some blockchains, they keep halting because there aren't a lot of validators on the blockchain because of high requirement. So in this case, you don't really want to build on a blockchain that keeps halting, right? So this is one thing that I check. The second thing that I check is the community and the people who are building the blockchain. So that's basically actually two different points: the experts who are behind the blockchain and the community that's running the blockchain. Because when you are planning to stay long term, you have to get involved with the community. There will be meetups across the world. You go ahead, share ideas, and if you fit in with the community, well, that's really a plus point, right? So these are the two things which I personally check.
Got it. And what's a good language to learn for non-techie specifically for building these smart contracts or programming in Web3?
Well, I would definitely, I personally, even though I'm from Tezos, I would suggest go with Solidity, because that is something that has tons of tutorials out there. Like if you go ahead on YouTube, you select Solidity tutorials, you will get like at least 500 videos and top recommendations. So I would say Solidity.
Got it. One sec, looking at other ones. Can you give some examples of how different dApps are monetized?
Are monetized? Yeah, sure. So in the case of Uniswap, like I said, you take one token and you swap it for another token. So every time you have this swap, there is a small fee that you pay. So let's say in Uniswap right now, the fees differ depending upon which token you are swapping. But in the previous Uniswap, it was 0.3% for every swap. So if you are swapping 1,000 of a certain token for some other token, then you will pay 0.3% of the 1,000 tokens as a fee. And this fee, a part of this fee goes to the people who are providing the liquidity, the market makers, and a part of it goes to the team. So that is where the team is getting their funding, not funding, but yeah, really their monetization from. So that's on Uniswap. And for other protocols, it's mostly fees in 90% of the case. And several other protocols have their own tokens. So in most of the cases, there's this, I won't really call bubble, but yeah, there's this thought that token prices keep increasing. So the teams can often profit with just having their own token with them. So that's another thing.
Got it. And Mohit has a good question.
Yeah.
At this point of time, a lot of apps that we are seeing, the dApps that we are seeing, are web apps.
Yeah.
Are there some which are Android apps or iOS app which we can download and interact with them?
So yes, this is a good question. There are no Android apps, but right now I'm not sure about Ethereum, but the place where I work, we are building something called Naan wallet. Naan is basically the food that you eat, naan, Naan. So using Naan wallet, you can actually interact with literally any Tezos application that you want. And that's a mobile. So Naan wallet is a mobile application that connects to all Tezos applications that are on the blockchain. So yeah, this is one thing that you can do.
Got it. A question by Yash: is deploying a dApp on testnet and mainnet different? Do we need
Yeah.
something? Sorry, let me just finish. Do we need extra something extra to deploy on the mainnet apart from this?
So yes, the deployment process is literally the same, like really no difference. The only difference is that on mainnet, when you are deploying, you need real tokens. The tokens on the testnet are different. So let's say if you are working on Ethereum, in Ethereum, we have different testnets with different names like Rinkeby testnet, and there's another testnet called Goldie testnet. And all these testnets have their own Ethereums. And these Ethereums don't have value because the chain that is connected on exchanges, that's the mainnet. So only the Ethereum on mainnet has values. So when you're deploying on mainnet, you need the tokens for the mainnet. And when you're deploying for testnet, you need the tokens for testnet. And the thing is, for mainnet tokens, you have to buy them using actual currency, fiat currency. But the testnet tokens, you can just get it for free on something called a testnet faucet. So you just Google testnet faucet for Ethereum. You go there and you just click on receive tokens and you will receive testnet tokens, but they don't have any values. So this is the only difference.
Okay. Vamsi is asking,
yeah,
when does it make sense to launch your own token inside or for your dApp?
This is a really good question. And I'm seeing most of the applications, they are launching token like straight away, but that is not very ideal. So usually I suggest the best path is that when you are just launching an application, ideally you launch it with a team, right? So when you're launching an application through a team, we have these things called multisigs. Now, multisigs basically work in a way that, let's say you have 5 members in your team, then in a multisig, you need at least 3 members to agree on a transaction that you're making. Okay. So that is really good in the starting phase, because why do we actually use tokens? Tokens are usually to outsource decisions and governance. 90% of the tokens are governance tokens. So you are delegating the fate of your project in the hands of the community, right? But when you are just starting off, the community doesn't really know in which direction will that project go. And if you have a token right from the beginning, it might get propelled into a wrong direction, a direction which you don't want the project to go into. So ideally, for the first few months, you run it using multisig, and you take the project in a condition where it can be handed over to the community. And that is where you launch a token, and well, it's all in the hands of community. Just for an example, there's this project called Tellor, Tellor on Ethereum. It's an Oracle system. They did it beautifully. They had a multisig initially, and then they delegated the governance to the community, and their tokenomics is like really great. So this is something you can check out.
Got it. Sridharan has a question. When does smart contract triggers? When you mentioned index solution information from backend. So what is the role of a smart contract in this place?
So let's say on Uniswap. Let's say on Uniswap, you want a list of all the possible transactions that you have ever made, all the possible token swaps you have ever done. Okay. Then what the indexer does is that, so let's say on Ethereum, we have these things called listeners. What these listeners do is that whenever there is a transaction on the smart contract, then these listeners pick up the transaction details and they put it into some database. Now, these listeners are there on a simple application that you deploy on the backend. So whenever I make a swap, basically this listener will see that, okay, a swap is made, and it will take the swap details and it will put it in a database. So basically, if I make 100 swaps, I will have 100 rows in a database. Now, pulling 100 different rows from the smart contract is difficult. And in smart contract, most often you don't even record which swaps has been done. Like if you study Uniswap, you will realize that smart contract doesn't record the swaps. So if you want to show the user all these analytics data, then you basically set up an indexer that keeps pulling and keeps filling in the rows. And then you can show some advanced data to the user directly from your database. I think that should clear your question.
Got it. Mayuresh is asking, what is Truffle, Hardhat, and Ganache?
So these are basically tools that can help you with smart contract development. So when you're writing smart contract, let's say if these tools didn't exist, the way you have to do is that you write smart contract, and then you have on Ethereum, I'm not sure what they're using right now. Back when I was working, they had this library called Solc, SOLC, which is a Solidity compiler. So you write your Solidity code, and then you compile it using Solc, and then you get something called a bytecode, which is just a bunch of gibberish numbers. And then you deploy this bytecode using some other library, which was the web3.js library. So this was a two-step process if you want to deploy a contract. And also, if you wanted to test the contract first, you have to deploy it on the test net, and then you have to start up another, like basically make a very basic front end and then send transactions to this test net to test it out. But with Truffle, Hardhat, and several other frameworks, I won't really call them frameworks, but tools, you basically get a local blockchain. So if you are using Truffle, it will set up a local blockchain for you. And instead of deploying on an actual testnet, you deploy the contracts on a local blockchain. And this local deployment is very instantaneous. Like you click enter and your contract gets deployed, and your transaction also gets accepted immediately. So this is where all of these tools come in for easy and seamless development of smart contracts. And yeah, it's only for smart contracts. Once you get to the front end and indexers, these tools won't be of any use.
Okay. Purva and Vamsi have a very similar question.
Yeah.
Are the prices of tokens completely dependent on their community, or can you fix them?
Well, yeah, we can fix them, like in the case of stable coins. So in stable coins, it's an attempt to fix the price, and that's what was going on in Luna. So Luna had a stable coin which was built into the protocol, UST, and they were trying to keep the price fixed to $1. Now they failed because the design was bad, but yeah, you can definitely keep the price fixed in using some mechanism. But otherwise, if you just let the price hover, then it can just hover around, and it really depends on how good the blockchain is and how good the experts behind the blockchain are and how well they are maintaining the blockchain. So the price will depend upon that.
Got it. Okay. And just continuing to the same thing, Raghavendra, additional questions. What are different intentions behind launching a token, and how to decide the quantity of them?
So the number one intention is definitely governance. So let's say I guess you all already had a session on DAOs, and in DAOs we have tokens, right? So in a usual a Web 2 company, we have stocks, and like stockholders can decide who is on the board of the company, right? But in the case of Web 3, if you have a DAO, then in the DAO you can basically vote using the DAO token, and you can decide on decisions like where should the protocol transition to, or which upgrade needs to be made to the protocol. So this is one reason you might have tokens, to build a DAO that decides the future of your protocol. Another reason why you might have token is something like what Luna did. So you have a token like Luna that is absorbing sell pressure from USD. This is a very bad design. I'm just giving an example to tell you how tokens can be used. But yeah, so governance and other could be protocol based design where you need the token in the protocol, in the equation of the protocol. That's where you can use it. But once again, 95% of the tokens out there are used for governance.
Got it. And is it necessary for you to list these tokens on exchanges when you launch it, or it's fine?
It's not necessary to list on a centralized exchange. Let's say if I am an Indian developer, I launch a project in India and a token in India, then it's not important for me to go ahead and list it on WazirX or CoinDCX. What I can do is I can list it on a decentralized exchange like Uniswap or KipuSwap on Tezos. Listing a token is easy because what if, let's say there's a really good project and I want to get involved in its DAO, where will I get the tokens from? Right? I need to get the tokens from somewhere. Now, if I know someone who can give me the tokens for free, then that's good. But if I want the tokens, ideally what I do is I can buy the token. So to buy the tokens, I have to go in an exchange. And decentralized exchange is a really nice place because there is no barriers to entry. And that is the beauty of Web3. If I want to list my token on WazirX or CoinDCX or some exchange like Binance, I have to go talk to them, and then they also charge a huge fees for token listing. All of that doesn't happen if I use a decentralized exchange. I just go ahead, I provide something called liquidity for my token. If you study Uniswap like I asked you to, you will understand what this means. But it's basically a seamless process and no one is charging any fee from me. So the listing tokens are important.
Got it. We'll take last two questions.
Yeah, sure.
One by Vamsi again. Aren't these tokens and rollups very similar? Yeah. Might as well build our own rollup if we have the sufficient team.
Rollups and tokens are not similar, but I mean, rollups is a scaling solution and token is a solution for governance. But rollups have tokens. Like Optimism is one of the first rollups to have its own token. That is the OP token. So the OP token holders can basically vote where Optimism will go. And they can also use OP tokens to actually pay the fees when they are transacting on the rollups. But rollups and tokens are not the same. And yeah, you can definitely build a rollup if you have the technical expertise and you have the necessary team.
Got it. And, one last question that I personally have. We spoke about, learn from the existing apps that are built and, build and make some improvements and then do it. Any such suggestions that you can give for non-techies and techies together, which they can study or understand to begin with as a beginner material?
Like
so that,
which dApps?
Yeah. Some references.
Yeah, for that, I actually have put several references. So in here, I've given Uniswap once again and Colibri. So it's literally the first thing should be Uniswap. The second thing should be MakerDAO. And after that, it should be Compound. This sequence should be followed. Uniswap is the most easy to understand. Then you can go ahead and understand a stablecoin system, which is MakerDAO. I have also placed the link for MakerDAO contracts. Sorry. I haven't able to find, wait. Yeah, in here. So I have MakerDAO, I have Uniswap, Colibri, and Compound. So if you just want an overall package, this is here. It's on your screen. Go ahead and explore these apps. These are your entry points into Dapp development.
Got it. I think that's it for today. A lot of things to learn and a lot of questions, more than we came in. A lot of food for thought. We'll keep that sinking in and learn on a lot of things. Any last words to the community who are building stuff?
Well, definitely this is a space that will go really far. Right now we are really, really early, and there's several people who are just coming into this space and leaving this because they are worried about the price. So don't focus on the token price and how the market is functioning. This space has been about giving a sound system of money to everyone, money that you can easily transfer, you can easily play around with. That is what this space has been all about. So keep building and stop focusing on the price. This is one thing I would like to tell everyone who is starting out.
Got it. Thank you so much for the validation, Anshu. And everyone who's joining in, the world is your playground. Thank you so much for joining in and wishing you a very good night. And let's sink in the lot of links. I'll share you the presentation link as well, so you all can refer. And once again, thank you, Anshu, for joining us, for doing this with today. And yeah, that's it for today.